Yes,
Are you recording?
Yes, we can start.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Good. Can you also tell me the name, the translation of the Russian girl's name that always comes up in Russian?
Mila.
Mila.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, once. Can she can read for us also?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, let us begin. This is a difficult canto, and it is a canto that Temi Ben would never let me read because it's so poignant. But let us see what Ashwapati, of course, Sri Aurobindo, has to say about this darkness and how does he bring the light into such darkness. We remember in Book 1, Canto 1, that for a long time, the darkness is resisting the light. It's quite a while until Usha can come and bring even a faint glimpse of the light. So now we're going to see what is happening with Ashwapati. The descent into night, a mind absolved from life, made calm to know, a heart divorced from the blindness and the pang, the seal of tears, the bond of ignorance. He turned to find that wide world failure's cause. So, what is actually absolved here? I believe the best definition would be discharged, free from guilt, absolved from life, free of the set free of the of our life, the human life. He also has a heart that is divorced from the blindness and the pang, both of which are very well known to all of us. Kama, the seal of tears, the bond of ignorance. He turned to find that wide world failure's cause. Well, this is most extraordinary. We know what a bond is. It's a fetter. It's a kind of binding compact and or an obligation even. So we have a seal of tears, we have blindness, we have the pang, we have the bond of ignorance. All these things he's now turning to find what is that cause in this wide world failure. Away he looked from nature's visible face. Well, he obviously has to look away from nature's visible face, even though he capitalizes nature here. In the synthesis of yoga, he tells us that nature is an active force of conscious being, which realizes itself in its powers of self-experience, its powers of knowledge, will, self-delight, self-formulation, with all their marvelous variations, inversions, conservations, and conversions of energy, even perversions, is what we call prakriti, or nature, in ourselves as in the cosmos. So obviously he has to look away from nature's visible face, he will look, he can see, of course, already nature's invisible face, because that is the divine creatrix, and sent his gaze into the viewless vast, the formidable, unknown infinity, asleep behind the endless coil of things that carries the universe in its timeless breadths, and the ripples of its being are our lives. Oh my gosh. This coil of things, this kind of spiraling of things, this spiral course that carries the universe. It is always moving upward. We know that, even though it seems not to be many times when we are in the throes of the falsehood, as we are now. And yet, it's asleep behind the endless coil of things, and that coil carries the universe in its timeless breadths, widenesses, and the ripples of its beings are our lives. How small we are. Yes, how small. We're just ripples of its being, little micro points in space. The worlds are built by its unconscious breath, and matter and mind are its figures of its powers. So the unconscious breath that is built by, he calls in another area, plasm and gas, humorously. Matter and mind are its figures or its powers. We must remember that it's figures or its powers. And matter is, of course, we know, not fundamentally real. It's simply a structure of energy. But it's a creative energy. And this matter and this mind, which is a movement of the power of the spirit, are its figures or its powers. Now, our waking thoughts, the output of its dreams. Interesting that Sri Aurobindo uses the word dreams here. And he calls our waking thoughts the outputs of this power of matter and mind, this unconscious breath that builds the worlds. Extraordinary, extraordinary. This formidable, unknown infinity that is asleep behind this endless coil of things carries the universe in its timeless breaths, and the ripples of its being are our lives. So we have to understand lines back to get the full picture Sri Aurobindo is giving us. And the worlds are built by its unconscious breath, and matter and mind are the figures of, or its powers. And what else? Our waking thoughts, the output of its dreams. So we can also say that the world is truly a dream of the divine, a dream of himself to explore the million vastnesses of himself in these forms which we call our human bodies. Could also be bodies that are not human on earth. The veil was rent that covers nature's depths. So this veil is now torn. it's rent, and it covers the depths of nature, because we can only see nature in a dualistic manner. Sun and shade, wet and dry, hot and cold. So that's what we see of nature. But deep in nature, of course, is the divine, everlasting power. And then, as he goes deeper, he sees something else. He saw the fount of the world's lasting pain. The fount here is not like a fountain, but it's the source or the origin of the world's lasting pain. And the mouth of the black pit of ignorance. And from the Life Divine, I just will share a brief passage or two. Ignorance, because he capitalizes ignorance, so it's important for us to remember that. Ignorance is the absence of the divine eye of perception, which gives us the sight of the supramental truth. It is the non-perceiving principle in our consciousness, as opposed to the truth-perceiving conscious vision and knowledge. This passage is so extraordinary that we need to have the divine eye of perception to actually see anything. That's why we are said to be blind or unsighted. Ignorance is the non-perceiving principle in our consciousness, as opposed to the truth-perceiving conscious vision and knowledge. Now, ignorance means avidya, the separative consciousness and the egotistic mind and life that flow from it, and all that is natural to the separative consciousness and the egoistic mind and life. This ignorance is the result of a movement by which the cosmic intelligence separated itself from the light of the supermind, the divine gnosis, and lost the truth of being, truth of harmony, divine consciousness, truth of force and action, truth of ananda. As a result, instead of a world of integral truth and divine harmony created in the light of the divine gnosis, we have a world founded on the part truths of an inferior cosmic intelligence. So there's so much there to share with you. And there's much more, but I do want to go back to it. So let me see now, get here. And the mouth of the black pit of ignorance. The evil guarded at the roots of life raised up its head and looked into his eyes. We see now that this evil that is guarded at the roots of life. You remember Mother going down and meeting this gigantic serpent and wanting to go down into that area, and he told her it is not permitted unless you can conquer the sex impulse in humanity. Now, it looks into his eyes. It's evil. on a dim bank where dies subjective space from a stark ridge overlooking all that is, a tenebrous, awakened nescience, her wide blank eyes wandering at time and form, stared at the inventions of the living void and the abyss whence our beings rose. So this is, of course, very complex, but we'll do our best. First of all, there's this stark ridge that seems to be overlooking all that is. And it's a tenebrous, dark and gloomy, tenebrous, awakened nescience. Now, Sri Aurobindo, very briefly in The Life Divine, tells us that nescience is the absence of knowledge or awareness, ignorance. Nescience in nature is the complete self-ignorance. Her wide eyes, her wide blank eyes, wondering at time and form. And for all of you who have been with me for so long, we've done form many times, so I will pass that. Stared at the inventions of the living void, the inventions of the living void. And we have to know that the void in our yoga is meant emptiness clear of all contents except existence, pure and simple. Without that, one cannot realize the silent Brahman. The void is, and that's from Letters on Yoga, and one more from Letters on Yoga. The void is the condition of the self, free, wide, and silent. It seems void to the mind, but in reality, it is simply a state of pure existence and consciousness, Sat and Chit with Shanti. Stared at the inventions of the living void and the abyss whence our beginnings rose. A very well used word in Old English, whence. Whence comest thou? Whence goest thou? So the abyss is the primal chaos, and he capitalizes the word abyss. It's the bowels of the earth, and it's the supposed cavity of the lower world, the infernal pit. Behind appeared a gray carved mask of night. Watching the birth of all created things. Now, night here is, of course, capitalized. And there are just two that I'm going to read to you from his Letters on Yoga. The night is the symbol of the ignorance, or avidya, in which men live, just as light is the symbol of truth and knowledge. And then he says in the second letter on yoga, in the way that one treads with the greater light above, even every difficulty gives its help and has its value. And night itself carries in it the burden of the light that has to be. Oh, how extraordinary. Watching the birth of all created things. And we have a few minutes, so I'll continue a little. A hidden puissance, conscious of its force, a vague and lurking presence everywhere, a contrary doom that threatens all things made, a death figuring as the dark seed of life, seemed to engender and to slay the world. This puissance, Sri Aurobindo tells us in the Life Divine, aware of the divine as the master of our being and action, we can learn to become channels of his Shakti, the divine puissance, and act according to her dictates or her rule of light and power within us. So, this hidden puissance is conscious of its force. And looking through this deep abyss, this carved mask of night, watching the birth of all created things, there is this hidden puissance that is conscious of its force, a vague and lurking presence everywhere, a contrary doom that threatens all things made, a death figuring as the dark seed of life, seem to engender and to slay the world. Simply to engender is to give rise to, or to produce, or to cause something, to beget something, to procreate, and to slay the world. Two things, almost paradoxical. So I just will go to the next page. Then, from the somber mystery of the gulfs, and from the hollow bosom of the mask, something crept forth that seemed the shapeless thought, a fatal influence upon creatures stole, whose lethal touch pursued the immortal spirit. On life was laid the haunting finger of death, and overcast with error, grief, and pain, the soul's native will for truth and joy and light. I told you it would be very dark. Then, from the somber mystery of the gulfs, somber is always gloomy, shadowy. And this mask is mentioned not twice, but 4 times in this opening passage. And it is purposely done to keep up the central connection of the idea running through the whole. The ambassadors weigh this gray mask, so your criticism cannot stand, since there is no separate mask coming as part of a new idea, but a very pointed return to the principal note indicating the identity of the influence throughout. It is not a random recurrence, but a purposeful touch carrying a psychological meaning. To give you a little insight in that, that was from a letter to Amal Kiran by Sri Aurobindo, who wanted to change that word. So Sri Aurobindo makes it very, very clear to him that he has used it 4 times in this section. So now we have something crept forth that seemed a shapeless thought, a fatal influence upon creatures stole, whose lethal touch pursued the immortal spirit. On life was laid the haunting finger. On life was laid the haunting finger of death, and overcast with error, grief, and pain, the soul's native will for truth and joy and light. Now we have to understand how to read that line. It's not overcast with error. It's overcast the soul's native will for truth and joy and light. This will be a fairly lengthy canto, and we'll have to take it a little bit slowly. We, at times in our lives and our yoga, have come into contact with this force from below. There can be no doubt about it. And we even see its action upon the earth today. So I think that will be it for tonight. Vladimir, do you want to add anything from the Vedas?
Maybe next time we will think of something.
Okay, good. Mila, could you read for us?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Canto 7, The Descent into Night. A mind absolved from life, made calm to know, a heart divorced from the blindness and the pang, the seal of tears, the bound of ignorance. He turned to find that wide-walled failure's cause. Away he looked from nature's visible face, and sent his gaze into the veilless vast, the formidable unknown infinity, asleep behind the endless coil of things that carries the universe in its timeless breadths, and the ripples of its being are our lives. The world are built by its unconscious breath, and matter and mind are its figures or its powers. Our waking thoughts, the output of its dreams. The veil was rent that covers nature's depth. He saw the fount of the world's lasting pain, and the mouth of the black pit of ignorance. The evil guarded at the roots of life, raised up its head and looked into his eyes. On a dim bank where dies subjective space, from a stark rigil overlooking all that is, a tenebrous awakened nescience, her wide black eyes wandering at time and form, started at the invention of the living void and the abyss whence our beginnings rose. Behind appeared a grey-covered mask of night, watching the birth of all created things. A height pursues conscious of its force, a vague and looking presence everywhere, a contrary doom that threatened all things made, a death figuring at the dark seed of life, seemed to engender and to slay the world. Then, from the sombre mystery of the gulfs and from the hollow bosom of the mask, something crept forth that seemed a shapeless thought, a fatal influence upon creature's soul, whose lethal touch pursued the immortal spirit. On life was laid the haunting finger of death, and overcast with arrow, grief and pain, the soul's native will for truth and joy and light.
Thank you very much. Namaste to all. And we'll continue next week. I'm happy to see some new people have joined. So.
Namaste.